Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Indie Music Podcast. So happy that you can be here. And for those who like indie music, please check out the rest of this channel. And welcome to the 161 subscribers here. You guys just blow my mind and are awesome. And any visitors here as well, I'm glad that you're here. And for those listening on the channel for a while, you've probably been waiting for this video. You knew that it was coming because a while back, in one of my early episodes, I covered Ben Gibbard and said that he was on, you could say, the Mount Rushmore of indie artists. Well, this band is probably on there as well. You know, you got to include them. And that's Arcade Fire, as obviously you can tell by the channel. You would really, I don't even know what you would have to do if you listen to this genre. And if you don't know who Arcade Fire is, I don't know how that's possible. I really don't. And that's not, I'm not even saying this with a bias. I mean, I think they're great, but they're not, a band I listen to all the time. But to really ignore the contribution that they've done, that's just a lot, I also want to preface this too. This video was hard to make, and that's not trying to gain sympathy towards me, but it was hard to make because of the recent allegations that have come out against their lead, really their leader of the group, Win. A lot of assault allegations have come out near the end of 2023. I am going to touch on that at the end. And really, this is more so celebrating the band and their accomplishments to indie music. If you're for, if you're against, if you're indifferent, that's fine. This is simply just a history of the band of Arcade Fire and their music. So with that all the way, let's begin. Let's go back to the very beginning days. And it starts out very normally, like a lot of bands have done throughout history. Two of them were in college. You had Win and then a guy named Josh, which we'll get to in a second. But they were playing music, and then eventually they met what's soon to be Win's wife. And my French is not very good, so I'm not going to attempt her name. I know she's from Haiti, which is important, which we're going to get to. But you know who I'm talking about. They met a lot of different other band members as well. They were playing music together, and they saw a lot of promise. They really were around Montreal as well. That's where the band originated from. Then they traveled to the United States to where they had extended family there. And what's kind of funny is that was going to be kind of their first big show. They put enough songs together to release like a show celebrating a self-released EP, and it was a self-titled one as well. But what's interesting is Win and then their bass player at the time got into a fight that was so bad that the bass player ended up leaving the band, and they almost had to convince the audience that this was not them breaking up as a band. So you can imagine, that it was pretty bad, for them to convince people like, hey, we're not breaking up, we're staying a band. They went through a lot of lineup changes, even throughout the band's history. It's always kind of been a revolving change of people throughout the whole thing. But this leads up to their very first album. 2004, Funeral comes out in September. Released in 2005, a little later in Britain. And why did they write it? Well, they sadly had several deaths happen of people that they were close to. And really, it was kind of their way of mourning. Now, a lot of their songs in there were on that somber note. You had also their band member, Win's wife, who came from Haiti, deliver a song that was entitled Haiti, and it was really a song about the violent history there as well. Now, that album, Funeral, some people say is Arcade Fire's best album. You know, they say if you're going to listen to them, you got to listen to that one first. It was on so many, end of the year top 10 lists, and it got recognition. It really did, it's kind of crazy where they even made Rolling Stone's top 500 greatest albums there. It was I think it was at 151. So yeah, it got the love that it deserved, but still, it didn't break into the mainstream. It was still big, but it wasn't, them getting everywhere and gaining all this recognition and so forth. But what's interesting is they did get love from Time Magazine. They got love from the BBC. They got a radio play. And what's really cool is they appeared on a television special, and David Bowie actually joined them and performed on some of their songs. So, what an honor for them to kind of do that. Then they kind of hit the United States tour. They started going out. And they opened up for U2 coincidentally and made such a big impression that U2 actually invited them to join on tour for a little bit as well. So, they were just doing really well for themselves right off the bat. And that just full on led them into 2006's second album. The second album was entitled Neon Bible. Like I said, it came out in 2006. The very first track was released in December of 2006. They have done so much work for charities as well, that they released a lot of their proceeds to charities. And again, it's really kind of like a copy and paste for the success that they had for Funeral. They performed for the first time on Saturday Night Live and about a year later in February 2007. And what's interesting about that performance, if you haven't seen it yet, is one of his guitar strings broke during one of the songs, and so he ripped the strings from the guitar and smashed it until, he shattered his guitar. It was cool once again. They did a special shout out for Haiti. They wrote saying a proverb, a Haitian proverb, on the front of their guitar during that performance as well. They were nominated for a Polaris Music Prize. They were doing really well for themselves. They did a massive United States tour, a Europe tour, and they were just doing so good, all the way into 2008, about a year after they toured, they said that the Neon Bible tour was over. So, they, again, are hitting that normal tour of album release tour. They got their songs, on television. They were just doing very well for themselves. And really, why I'm saying this and pointing so much attention to their albums is because that was really their bread and butter. And it leads so perfectly to the third album. The third album was called The Suburbs. And really, everything that they had done in each album really led up to this moment. It was very different than what they had been doing before, yet some similarities. They released some new songs before the album came out when they did a Reading and Leeds tour. They broadcasted their tour live on YouTube. And then The Suburbs was released at August 2010 with just as much critical acclaim as Funeral and Neon Bible gave. It was just massive at the time. Those of us who were listening to indie music during the end of the 2000s there, how big The Suburbs was, because this is the moment they broke into the mainstream. In fact, they won Grammy for an album of the year, the biggest reward, So they just really completely took over the music awards. They performed at the Grammys as well. They performed at the Brits. They won awards there. And they did a deluxe edition even of The Suburbs as well. So David Byrne was involved in that. If you know who that is, please check him out. They performed on Saturday Night Live once again. And they're crushing it. They're killing it. They did music. They did even the score for one of the Hunger Games musics as well. So they are just doing amazing. Like I said, this is probably, other than Death Cab for Cutie, the biggest indie band that you can think of. And like I said, some would argue that they did break into the mainstream, especially when they won the Grammy Award. 2013 was when Reflector came out. So a few years passed before they came out with a new album. I mean, they were still extremely busy at the time. They were doing scores and music for movies as well. So, on top of the Arcade Fire tours, they're very busy in their downtime as well. Reflector had another very successful release. Did very well critically, did very well selling-wise. They were even the premiere for Saturday Night Live that season as well, and performed on that. And they did a special as well where they had famous actors and actresses talk about them and their music. So, it's just amazing. They're doing amazing things. In 2016, they released the album Everything Now. A lot of fans of Arcade Fire kind of see this as the first real miss that they did. It didn't get as much love from critics. It didn't get as much love for selling or for airplay as well. In fact, that was when one of their managers parted ways with the band as well. So, it did all right, but it didn't do amazing. And 2020 was when they announced they were going to be releasing a sixth album. They had been writing the album before COVID. And then to build anticipation, they were releasing little bits and pieces, little musical scores as well. And then in March 2022, they started to tease albums. It was amazing because in the meantime, they started playing concerts for Ukraine relief as well. And tickets, they performed in New York City in March of that year. I remember this. They had tickets that were being sold for Pay What You Can as well. So in March 2022, they announced a release date for their album, which was released on May 6th, which was simply called We as well. So they toured for it on May 6, 2022, performed on Saturday Night Live the very next day on May 7th as well. And this is kind of where things really got intense. In August of 2022, Wynn was accused by 4 people of several instances of sexual misconduct. You can argue for, you can argue against. I'm not going to talk too much about them because I want to make sure I get the story straight. But of course, you can Google search. It's on there about the accusations. But they did lose their opening band, Feist. And then Beck actually was going to be one of the opening acts and dropped out for their American tour as well. But Arcade Fire still keeps going. They have not stopped. Even to this date, they are still performing massive shows. Like I said earlier in the video, they do so much for charity. They have several different charities that they have set up, especially for Haiti, which I think is absolutely amazing. They've done tours, no kidding, since 2003 with very little stoppage in between. If anything, it was just to record albums. So they have been pretty much busy nonstop for 20 years. If you have not listened to Arcade Fire for some reason, you have to listen to the first three albums. You got to listen to Funeral, you have to listen to Neon Bible, and you have to listen to The Suburbs. You just have to, all the way through. No skipping. You got to listen to all the way through. But anyway, please tell me what you think. What's your favorite album of theirs? What's your favorite song of theirs, of Arcade Fire? Do you think that they are the biggest indie band that has come out? And I will talk to you all next week.